Oh, g'day and welcome to the very first episode of Cracked, the little corner of the Not So Bright Side network where we discuss some very real, confirmed conspiracy theories and some less real, very much made up bullshit conspiracy theories. I wanted to start on a light-hearted one just to dip our toes into the waters of conspiracy thought with something you don't really need much background info on. Stuff like MK Ultra, Operation Paperclip, and QAnon require a little bit of groundwork and background knowledge, which we can cover in different episodes. But tonight, I kind of wanted to just do something lighthearted and have some fun with it. We're going to talk about something that pretty much everyone watching should know about. If you haven't heard of it before, where the fuck have you been? You must have been under a rock. But first, I do have to introduce my guest. Anth is a horror game streamer and host of the Not So Bright Side podcast, a god in the Western Sydney hardcore scene, and one of my oldest friends. Anth, welcome to Cracked.
Oh, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. That was a really lovely intro.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I guess the first...
I didn't wear my tin foil today.
Yeah, I was kind of tempted to fashion a baseball cap style one that would stay on my head properly. Because the ones we wore for that live Not So Bright Side one day, A, they didn't stay on well, and B, when they were on, they made you sweat like a motherfucker.
I honestly thought I was going to die. Like I
guess
thought it was bad.
It's the price you pay for having your thoughts protected from the government, I guess.
True. All right, let's get into it.
Oh, I guess first I need to ask you what your favorite conspiracy theory is.
So I thought about this. You actually gave me a bit more prep time than other episodes that I've been on for other people. But I think the most interesting, intriguing one that is 100% confirmed real that I've sort of fallen down the rabbit hole for is Bob Ross is actually a serial killer. And his paintings, hear me out, his paintings are where he's buried his victims.
I haven't heard this one, but I'm connecting dots in my mind, and you know what? That's not bad. I quite like that.
If you tell me to go in depth with it, I can't do much more than that.
You know what? Don't worry about it. I'll do my research. I'll get you back on, and we'll go over Bob Ross being a serial killer. That would ruin me. That'd be heartbreaking, to be honest. I hope he wasn't. He's a lovely man, wasn't he?
Well, I think so. Unless he's a serial killer. But apparently, the happy little mistakes or whatever. So, people can draw the dots to that and be like, "This is why." And then he said something about one stage he was going to take a painting to his friend because the scenery reminded him of a certain friend or something. I think that's where people started diving down that rabbit hole. But yeah, that interests me.
All right, I'll do a little bit of reading. I'll watch a few episodes and I'll see what I can come up with. If there's not enough dots to connect, I'll find some, or I'll make some up.
100% confirmed, real.
Okay, cool. Well, let's get into tonight's episode a little bit.
I'm excited.
Let me ask you, what is the most famous ship that you know of?
Mary Celeste. Titanic.
Mary Celeste was a very good answer. Very good answer. I also would have accepted the Starship USS Enterprise, the good ship Lollipop, and the incestuous shipping of Sam and Dean Winchester from Supernatural.
Damn it!
But obviously the Titanic is super famous because of the 1997 James Cameron epic of the same name. But if you haven't seen the movie, what you might not know is that it sank on its maiden voyage, taking more than 1,500 souls down to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean with it. Do you know why the Titanic sank on that cold April night in 1912?
Because the doors weren't big enough for two people. No, wait, that's not the answer. I don't actually know. I don't know. I think it hit an iceberg, but this is a conspiracy show, so I actually don't know. Aliens? Bigfoot?
Few good guesses, but all wrong. It sank because of a mummy's curse.
What the hell?
So, yeah, according to some, the Princess of Amun-Ra was on board, being shipped to America after a string of tragedies followed her coffin after it was purchased by 4 young, rich Englishmen. car crashes, unexplained sudden deaths, measles outbreaks, and at least 3 suicides were directly linked to this cursed mummy. And even Madame Helena Blavatsky, the famous woo-woo woman of the late 1800s, she visited the coffin after it was sold by the British Museum to a private collector, and she said that it had an evil energy lurking about it.
Oh, okay.
An American ended up buying the long-dead princess and sent it back to the US on the ill-fated Titanic. Now, just to be clear, none of that's true.
Oh, you got me again.
The story about the mummy's curse is totally made up, every single part of it. Madame Blavatsky was even dead by the time this story was supposed to have taken place. The Princess of Amun-Ra was not on the Titanic when it sunk, but William Stead was. And he was one of the 2 men who made up the whole cursed mummy story. It was already a thing before the Titanic sank. The Titanic sinking was later linked to the story because Stead died on the Titanic. That's all. So no, tonight we're not talking about cursed mummies or the British Museum, but we probably will at some point. But for this episode, we will stay with the Titanic to examine one of my favorite conspiracy theories of the early 20th century.
Okay. Let's get into it. Yeah.
Do it. In 1908, 3 massive, expensive ocean liners were commissioned by the White Star Line Company. These ships were the Olympic, the Britannic, and the Titanic. Among the White Star Line's other ships were the Teutonic, the Majestic, the Oceanic, the Adriatic. You're sensing a theme here.
Mm-hmm.
There was also the Laurantic, the Megantic, the Republic, the Cretic, the Romanic, the Canopic. I could go on.
There's a lot of Serbian names.
Yeah, I will go on. There was also the Atlantic, the Asiatic, the Tropic, the Belgic, the Germanic, and the Arabic. Right, so I'm not done because there was the Gaelic, the Homeric, the Coptic, the Ionic, and the Runic. The Runic was actually involved in the Halifax explosion. There was a massive disaster that killed nearly 1,800 people and injured 9,000 more in an accidental explosion that was the equivalent of 2.9 kilotons of TNT.
If you tell me all of these icks perished in some type of bizarre way,
some of them did. Some did sink. Some were wrecked. A couple disappeared. The White Star Line had a lot of ships. They were around for quite a long time. They were one of the biggest shipping companies in the world.
Yeah.
Where was I? Oh, okay, yeah. There was the Neronic, the Bovic, the Gothic, and the Nomadic. Honestly, there's like a dozen more. This joke's run its course. The White Star Line was in a shipbuilding war with the Cunard steamship line and had just obtained a few other ships to compete with the Cunard's ships, which included the Lusitania, which was famously sunk by the Germans in the early days of World War One. And that's another ship I could cover here if people are interested, because there's some very reasonable questions to ask about why that was sunk, how it was sunk, and probably a little bit more of a reasonable conspiracy theory than this Titanic one we're covering. But even the White Star Line's newest ships couldn't compete with the Lusitania's speed. It was the fastest ship of its size at the time. Okay. So that's when they made the decision to build the Titanic and her sister ships. Now, obviously, it's very expensive to build shitloads of luxury cruise ships, especially in the early 1900s, but that wasn't a problem for the White Star Line because in 1902, they were purchased by none other than famous piece of shit J.P. Morgan. Now, that name might sound familiar to you. There's a bank that still has that name. Old JP had more money than God in 1902, and so the White Star Line was able to spend millions on ship production. Yeah. The Titanic cost $7.5 million to build.
I wonder how much
1910s
that would be.
money.
Yeah, how much would that be this time?
Yeah, I should have looked that up. That would have been interesting. But yeah, it's those ships cost an absolute fortune. So the first of these new ships were built. Sorry, the first one was the Olympic. That was the first one that hit the ground running. Yep. The Olympic was almost identical to the second ship, the Titanic. In fact, the image that I've got up on the screen right now That's not the Titanic.
What do you mean?
That's the Olympic. So
I've been
if
befuddled.
you have been, you've been trolled a little bit there. If you flip over to image number 2, you'll see the Olympic and the Titanic side by side.
They're the same ship.
They are very, very close. Just the average person looking at them even side by side wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Like right now, looking at the second photo, is that up now?
Number 2 is up. Yep, correct. There's
Number
side
2?
by side.
Side by side, I don't know which one's which. It was, I believe the one on the right is the Titanic because it doesn't look like it's fully finished being built.
Yep.
But yeah, you just can't tell the difference. There are a couple of differences. The number of portholes along the side is different. The distance between the decks is a little bit different, but just by looking at it. If you switch to photo 3, you can see them being built side by side as well, and you can see why they call them sister ships. Like they're being birthed from the same giant steel vagina.
Yeah, absolutely. that one got me.
It's
I was about to say something, and I'm like, that was brilliant. I
love that photo. It's huge. It's huge.
Wow.
I mean, just think about the safety standards of working in a place like that way back then.
That looks like bamboo
I should have
holding
looked
it up.
But I reckon a fair few people would have died building that shit, eh?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So before the Titanic was finished being built and brought into service, the Olympic was released into the ocean and had a pretty serious accident. On the 20th of September 1911, it collided with the HMS Hawke and suffered extensive damage both above and below the waterline. So if you switch to the next photo, number 4, you can see the damage done to the Olympic on the left. So there's a pretty big hole there. And the damage below the waterline was much worse than that as well.
Yep.
And on the right, you can see the bow of the Hawke, which was really fucked up.
Yeah.
I don't know if they even bothered trying to repair that one. That's a big job.
She's totaled, boys. Let's get a new one.
She's messed up. She's gone. So both the Olympic and the Hawke had to be towed back to shore and undergo expensive repairs. But even worse for the White Star Line was that the Olympic was found to be at fault, and so the insurance company refused to cover the costs of the repairs, which was a pretty huge hit to the pockets of the White Star Line. In April of the next year, 1912, for those keeping track, the Titanic was unveiled to the public and entered service. Its first voyage was supposed to take it from Southampton in England to New York City, but it barely made it 4 days into the trip. Obviously, the damage done to the in the accident to the Olympic was terrible news for the White Star Line and its investors. But the sinking of its newest, biggest, and flashiest ship on its maiden voyage was far more damaging to their pockets.
Mm-hmm.
Or was it?
Oh, yes.
Herein lies the mystery. All right. So some people, mainly Redditors and self-published authors, believe that the Olympic and the Titanic had been switched in a bid to recoup the losses from the refusal of the insurance company to pay out the White Star Line after the Olympic's accident.
Okay.
So according to these people, the plan was to later scuttle the Titanic, which was really the already damaged Olympic, and claim a huge payout for the supposedly brand new ship. The iceberg interfered with that plan, though. They weren't expecting it to actually sink on its first voyage. They were going to let it do its little trip over to America, and then later on, fake some kind of damage and have it sink without a couple thousand people on board. That didn't go to plan.
No.
Many people were shocked that the Titanic could have sunk after hitting an iceberg. It was advertised as being unsinkable. Like there's that they mention it in the movie. You know, that person says that God himself couldn't sink this thing. You know, that's bad luck to say that, I reckon. But if the already damaged Olympic had hit an iceberg, then it's conceivable that it would be more likely to sink. So there's a few more suspicious things as well. Like, I wouldn't say that alone would be worth forming a conspiracy around, but let's see what you think about this next few things.
Okay.
It's also suspicious that prior to the Titanic's launch, the White Star Line refused to allow a public examination of the ship. Usually, with a new cruise ship, especially one as prestigious as the Titanic, the public would be allowed on board to have a look around, and reporters would write reviews, ship nerds would inspect every inch of the thing. So, did the White Star Line not allow anyone on to inspect the ship for fear of it being discovered to actually be the Olympic? Maybe.
Okay.
There are some other items of interest worth discussing, though. Some of the wealthiest people in the world were on board the Titanic's maiden voyage. They actually called it the millionaire's ticket or something like that. There was just so many rich people on board, including John Astor, Isidor Straus, and Benjamin Guggenheim, all three of whom were opposed to J.P. Morgan's idea of establishing a centralized banking system in America. Not even a year after the Titanic sank, with his opposition on board, Morgan's dream came true with the foundation of the US Federal Reserve. That, still a lot of rich people on board. A lot of these really rich people at the time were not getting along all that well. That's all good. But it's kind of surprising that those three people that JP Morgan didn't get along with, they were all invited on the cruise.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm watching an episode of Bridgerton.
This
is great. Keep going.
It's a little bit dodgy.
Okay.
It's also worth noting that JP Morgan himself was supposed to be on the Titanic when it left for New York.
Yeah.
But cancelled just hours before the voyage went underway. He didn't show up. Did he know something? One more thing, while several of Morgan's business rivals were on board, there were no members of the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds families present on the ship. Two ultra-rich families that got on pretty well with JP Morgan for the most part.
Interesting.
Yeah, so, got people he doesn't like on board, got some of his best mates not on board. He didn't show up. So, as host, it is my responsibility to be transparent. There is little to no evidence to support any of what I've just said.
Oh, come on!
I'm sorry to do this to you, man, but there's no record.
I'm so invested.
You really want to believe, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
There is nothing on record of John Astor or Benjamin Guggenheim being opposed to a centralized banking system, and Strauss actually spoke in favor of it. So that argument's out the window. There's also no indication that JP Morgan skipped the trip for any nefarious reason, besides that he wanted to go to a spa in France with his mistress. There is possible he also went to France instead of getting on the boat, the ship, because he was trying to export some really valuable art, because he was also an art collector and an art dealer. And France were changing their laws about letting expensive art go to America. They weren't a fan of all their precious shit being shipped off to the States. There's a couple of reasons why he might not have gotten on the ship. And there's nothing to say that he didn't get on last minute as well. That's sort of, it might have been days before that he decided not to go. Also, the Titanic was only insured for $5 million, which wasn't even enough to cover the cost of the Olympic. So if they really wanted to do this big insurance scam, they probably would have insured it for more.
Yeah.
Maybe they couldn't for some reason, but still, $5 million back then is a lot of money. I think some of those, JP Morgan would kill 1,500 people for $5 million. I can guarantee that. He basically did kill people for less.
Look, I don't want to agree with anything anymore. I'm too worried you're rickrolling me on everything.
I keep shocking you. I'm sorry about that. This story is just a fun little story made up by using cherry-picked information. I am sorry to disappoint you, but I do have one more very real, very fun fact that I can leave you with.
Okay.
Very, very real. This happened. This might be the most unbelievable part of it, but this happened.
Oh, God.
In August of 1996, on the final night of filming James Cameron's Titanic on their set in Nova Scotia, the cast and crew had a final meal together in the cafeteria. Cameron himself was there, along with Bill Paxton and dozens upon dozens of other people involved in the filming. The main dish of the night was clam chowder. Chowder!
Chowder!
Say it, Frenchie. One person on the scene was our set painter, Marilyn McAvoy. She said of the chowder, "It was unbelievable. People were going back for second bowls. I really thought about going back because it was so good. And I think that was part of the problem. People ate a lot more than usual because it was so delicious." Now, part of the problem, what problem could there have been with delicious clam chowder? I mean, clam chowder is a blessing. Unless, of course, that chowder is laced with PCP.
No.
Yes.
No. This is the most unbelievable part of all of them.
I warned you, man. It sounds like a really good joke, but it's this happened.
Who put PCP in it?
Within 15 minutes, members of the crew started to feel off. They were confused and distracted and unable to get back to work. As the crew began to hallucinate and generally fall apart, people realized that all of the affected people had eaten the chowder. Word got back to James Cameron, who immediately made himself throw up. It was around this time that crew vans started shuttling people off to the local hospital. The scene at the hospital was one of sheer fucking chaos. Can you imagine dozens of people tripping balls on PCP? People were cruising around in wheelchairs, visiting each other's hospital rooms, even playing hacky sack. Like, they were just partying. By sunrise, though, the effects of the drug had worn off and everyone went home for some sleep. Police later confirmed via testing that the chowder had indeed been spiked with quite a lot of PCP. Possibly the worst drug to be surprised with.
What? Are you gonna tell me who did it? Is there a who did it?
Just about there, man. Just about there.
Let's go.
So Bill Paxton and James Cameron and a few others have been interviewed about the spiking incident, and the general theory is that someone who had been laid off the day before had spiked it. But no charges were ever laid, and pretty much everyone just went on with their lives. So yeah, that's I wanted to leave you with something that was real, that can be confirmed, and is, I mean, drugging people without their consent is wrong and illegal, but in this very specific case, I find it hilarious.
Man,
it's absolutely my favorite part of this story.
That's incredible. I had no idea. I don't know if it's real. I'm so scared to believe it.
I only heard about it maybe a year ago, but apparently it has been public knowledge since about 2017 when the first person was talked about it in an interview, I think on a podcast.
Maybe Bob Ross did it.
Yeah, let's not disparage that poor man anymore in today's episode until I can confirm that he is or isn't a serial killer.
100% real.
So yeah, that's it for the Titanic tonight. Thanks for checking us out. Don't forget you can catch us most weeks doing the Not So Bright Side podcast over at twitch.tv/Volky. That's VOLLKKII. Anth, do you have anything you want to plug before we head off?
I have nothing else to plug other than your beautiful face, and thank you for having me on this wonderful little episode. I loved it.
No worries. You were a great first guest. Thank you for making it easy on me.
I'm a good guinea pig.
You are. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening and watching, actually. And remember, the truth is out there, but so is a lot of bullshit. So don't believe everything you read on the internet.